मैं रोई जहाँ खाए तमाचे में रोई जहाँ। सलवात पर मोहम्मद।
पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। रो के ज़ैनब ने कहा, ऐ मेरे भाई बता, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। रो के ज़ैनब ने कहा, ऐ मेरे भाई बता, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। तेरे जाने से बहन कितनी मजबूर हुई, हाय गुर्बत पे मेरी बंद आंखें हैं तेरी। ए बिने शाह नजफ, एक नजर मेरी तरफ देखने से जरा, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। आज तू होता अगर बेरिदा होती ना मैं, अपने अकबर के लिए आज यूं रोती ना मैं। देख गुर्बत ये मेरी याद आती है तेरी, क्यों मुझे छोड़ गया, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। रो के ज़ैनब ने कहा, ऐ मेरे भाई बता, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। मेरी गर्दन में रसन, मेरे हाथों में रसन, बन के कैदी ये सितम शाम आई है बहन। ये ना भूलूंगी कभी, तूने घर में भी कभी मुझको चलने ना दिया, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। है सकीना की सदा, हो चचा जान कहा, देखो चेहरे पे मेरे है तमाचों के निशान। प्यास से खुश्क ज़बान, खून कानों से रवा है ये होठों पे सदा, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। रो के ज़ैनब ने कहा, ऐ मेरे भाई बता, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। ऐ मेरे भाई मुझे है ये गम सब से बड़ा, मुझको बागी की बहन शाम वालों ने कहा, ज़ब्त किस तरह करूं, बात ये कैसे सहूं, दिल ना फट जाए मेरा, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। हाय सजाद मेरा है झुकाए हुए सर, कितने गम टूट गए उस पे दोहराए सफर। क्या क़यामत थी बपा, सुन के वो रोता रहा, जब सकीना ने कहा बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। रो के ज़ैनब ने कहा ऐ मेरे भाई बता, बेरिदा कैसे चलूं। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात।
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا، مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة، الحجة ابن الحسن العسكري، فداه أرواح العالمين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal Fatima. My dear brothers and sisters, elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After the conclusion of the intense period of mourning and lamentation for the master of the youth of paradise, Aba Abdullah al-Husayn, we find ourselves in a position that is unenviable. On the one hand, you feel that you wish that period extended to cover the entire year. Because Imam al-Husayn brings out the best in each of us, doesn't he? He has this incredible power to turn even those like me, who aren't exactly exemplars of moral values, who don't spend much effort in perfecting themselves and sculpting their souls. Throughout the year, people like me are distracted, confused, going in different directions, failing to take advantage of incredible opportunities in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors to His mercy, whether those are in the holy month of Ramadan or many other events scattered across the Islamic calendar, where God says, come, I'm inviting you all. Take advantage of this time that I've allocated for your spiritual development. Or even the recommended acts, deeds, Salatul Layl, Tahajjud, prayer, supplication, all of those things that help mold a person into the kind of individual that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All those opportunities are missed. Then comes Muharram. Something happens inside. Anyone that Allah has blessed to harbor the love of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, a love that God Himself places in our hearts. إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا, if Allah truly loves someone, you would only give the best gift to the ones you love the most. When Allah loves someone, the gift He gives that person is the ultimate gift. It's the key that unlocks the secrets of the universe. It's the cause of every good deed and moral action. إذا أحب الله عبدا قذف في قلبه حب الحسين. Allah firmly places the love of Husayn in that person's heart. وحب زيارته, because loving Imam al-Husayn in itself is not enough. That love needs to manifest itself. It needs to show. And that's one difference between hub and mawadda. Hub is to love someone. A husband can tell his wife that I love you. But if he doesn't show it, if he doesn't remember their anniversary, if he doesn't buy her gifts, if he doesn't buy her flowers, the wife is well within her right to say, well, prove it. Show me how you love me. Mawadda is different in that it is love that transcends the heart and manifests itself in reality, in physical reality. قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَةِ. Which is why if someone says that we love the Ahlul Bayt, we in fact love the Ahlul Bayt more than you do, we say fine, good for you, God bless you, show it. How is that love manifested? How does the love actualize in reality? We're the ones who visit the Ahlul Bayt. We're the ones who mourn for them, lament for them, cry for them, feed others in their love, quench the thirst. I was saying to my Uber driver the other day, I said, what do you know about Imam Husayn? He said, yeah, I know Imam al-Husayn, the Prophet's grandson, this, that. I said, wonderful. Come visit in Karbala. And it's all free of charge. Come, you'll be served, you'll be looked after, you'll be fed, you'll have your thirst quenched, right? And it's all for the love of Husayn. 1 billion meals. I did a quick calculation right there in the car. I said, do the maths. 26 million people for 2 weeks, 3 meals a day. That's 1.01 billion meals. given in the name of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. Like I said, it brings out the best in each of us. You see, people are different in Ashura. Throughout the days, the 10 days of Muharram, there is this incredible, inseparable bond that you forge with all of the community members. Husayn truly unites us, which is why you feel so sad and disheartened when the season ends. Like, I wish this was extended. I wish we could have more. On the other hand, we are like people who have just discovered a mine filled with diamonds and the most precious minerals. By being reintroduced to Abu Abdullah in the 10 days of Muharram, we find ourselves in the middle of an ocean with no shores. It is so great, so vast, so expansive, the ocean of Husayn. This treasure chest, we've just discovered it. Think about that for a moment. Don't ever imagine that you learned everything there is to learn about Imam al-Husayn in the 10 days and nights. You've just discovered him. So now, what do? You come across a diamond mine, you come across an oil reservoir, you come across something that's infinitely precious as Husayn, you're supposed to take from him. Now that you've discovered it, it's your turn and your prerogative to try and extract as much from this treasure as you humanly can. Because let me tell you something. Imam al-Husayn gave us glimpses of his power and his grandeur on the day of Ashura. For instance, he turned otherwise ordinary, normal, regular, boilerplate human beings into Habib ibn Mudahir, into Muslim ibn Awsajah, into Abis ibn Shabib al-Shakiri, the one who threw his helmet, took off the armor, tore his shirt, headed straight into the battlefield and said, "Come and get me, leave my master alone." Imam al-Husayn has the power and the potential to turn people into Burayr. It always sends shivers down my spine when I remember what Burayr said to Imam al-Husayn. When the Imam said to his companions, إِنَّ هَذَا اللَّيْلَ قَدْ غَشِيَكُمْ, see the darkness, use it. Grab the hand of one of my family members and leave me alone. These people only want to kill me. They're not looking after you. There's no point. There's no reason for you to get killed. Imam al-Husayn is making a rational argument. Not only that, but he's giving them permission to leave. The Imam, they had pledged their allegiance to him. The Imam says, you're relieved of your allegiance. You're relieved of your duties. Go. The first person to stand up was Abil Fadl al-Abbas. Salawatullahi alayhi. Then the companions got up. Habib ibn Mudahir, Muslim ibn Awsajah, Hamid ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, and others. Then Burayr stands up. There are actually two incidents mentioned here. One where Burayr spoke to the Imam in the presence of all of the other companions and Bani Hashim. They each made a speech that shakes the entire world. But then the Imam would go and speak to them individually. I mean, the extent to which the Imam went to vet his companions is mind-boggling. To try and ensure that they're going to stand by him on the day of Ashura. And every time the Imam spoke to them, what he's doing isn't just filtering and vetting. The Imam is giving them the boost they need so they don't run. Which is why on the day of Ashura, no one from the camp of Imam al-Husayn left except al-Dhahak al-Mashriqi. And Dhahak had made a deal with Imam al-Husayn. You've heard his story. He's the one who narrates the number 72, which by the way is inaccurate. There were many more companions than that. Imam al-Hadi mentions about 100 or so in Ziyarat al-Nahiyah. But al-Dhahak had made a deal with Imam al-Husayn that I will come with you and stand by you so long that I know I can save your life. If you're going to die, there's no point in me fighting anymore. People come in different levels, right? I'm not saying Al-Dhahak was an evil, wicked man, but his iman and his level of faith and conviction was so low that he left Imam al-Husayn on the plains of Karbala knowing that he would be murdered, and left. The Imam said to him, of course, you're free to leave. But how are you going to escape? Because remember, the camp of the Imam had been sealed from the 9th of Muharram. No one could escape. No one could come in. The hadith, in fact, by Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam says that when the camp was sealed on the day of Tasu'ah, the army of Ibn Ziyad, Umar ibn Sa'ad, Shimr and others, they rejoiced. Having seen 30,000 of them amass, the people came from Sham as well as those who had come from Kufa, and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was under siege. So the Imam said to the Dhahak, how are you going to escape? You don't have a horse. All the horses were killed in the first ambush. So he said to the Imam, I have a horse lined up in one of the tents. He always had an exit strategy. That's why when you move towards Imam al-Husayn, let me mention this because I think it's practical and important. When I decide to leave a bad habit, a sin, something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to please Abu Abdullah, you should ensure that you don't have an exit strategy. You don't leave for yourself any room for complacency or for turning around. You migrate. A migration is different from tourism. When a tourist travels, they know they're going away for 2 weeks, they're going to come back to their home, they have everything lined up. But when someone migrates, when someone goes to another country as a refugee, they leave everything behind. Which is why when you want to board the ark of Abu Abdullah, you leave everything behind. This is the point of no return. I'm never going back to this. In honor of Husayn. I'm never committing this sin again. In honor of Husayn. I'm going to forgive my spouse and my relatives who have wronged me and hurt me and oppressed me. I don't care. I'm doing that in honor of Husayn. I don't care about their reaction. I don't care what they say. Just the other day, a very, very dear friend of mine, may Allah bless him, he had a falling out with a member of the community in London, and it was messy and dirty, and lawyers were involved. It almost went to court, and he was oppressed. I was involved in the reconciliation efforts. I was trying to get these two brothers to find some common ground, but unfortunately it didn't work out. As I said, it got really ugly. And so he went to Karbala for Ashura. When he came back, he said, you know what? I went to the shrine of Imam al-Husayn, and I said to him, Ya Abu Abdullah, for your sake, I forgive him. Yes, he's oppressed me. Yes, he's hurt me. But in your name, it's all worth it. And inshallah, I'll explain in the rest of the lecture why that is. So, Imam al-Husayn goes to Burayr. He says to him, Burayr, you see that valley over there? In other words, not only is the Imam giving him permission, relieving him of his duties and all that, the Imam is giving him a route to escape through. He says to him, you see that valley in between these two hills? You know you can take that and just leave. He looked at Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. He said to him, Sayyidi yabna Rasulullah, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. Allah has bestowed His greatest blessing upon me. أَن نُقَاتِلَ دُونَكَ, that we fight in your defense. وَتُقَطَّعَ أَعْضَاؤُنَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْكَ, and to have our limbs torn apart for your sake. I couldn't ask for anything greater from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you want me to leave? أَكَلَتْنِ السِّبَاعُ حَيًّا إِنْ أَنَا تَرَكْتُكَ. May the beasts of the desert eat me alive if I ever left you. I'm not even going to entertain that. This is the potential that Imam al-Husayn has. Can he do the same with me? This sinful, insubordinate slave who never listens to his masters? The answer is yes. If he does it with hur, why not me? what Hur did to Imam al-Husayn, none of us have. Hur's turning point, you've all heard the story. The turning point for Hur was when Imam al-Husayn said to him, let me go. He said, no, I have orders to put you under siege. You're not allowed to go. Not only that, I have orders an uja'ja'a bika at-tariq, which means that I would put you in the most uncomfortable positions. If there's a tree over there, you're not allowed to go and stand under the shadow of the tree. بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. You're not to have any shadows that protect you from the sun. You're not allowed to have access to the water. You're not allowed to be in a green place. It has to be the worst place. So the Imam said to him, ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ. May your mother grieve over you. Instinctually, when someone's mother is insulted, they respond, they reciprocate. He was about to do that when he remembered Imam Husayn's mother. He said, had I not known that you are the son of Fatima to Zahra, I would have said the same thing about you. We say, Ya Aba Abdullah, Hur almost cursed Fatima to Zahra, and yet when he came to you and said to you, هل لي من توبة, is there a chance for me? Is there any possibility of redemption? You said to him, نعم تاب الله عليك. Yes, Allah has already forgiven you. In other words, from the moment you began to distance yourself from the camp of Yazid, with that very first step, Allah forgave you. Ya Aba Abdullah, we love your mother Fatima Zahra. We mourn for her. We would lay our lives for her. If you can do that with Hur, surely you can do it with me. The problem though, my dear brothers and sisters, is not with the diamond mind. It's not with this endless ocean. It's not with Imam al-Husayn. The problem's right here. The problem is that now that we've discovered this priceless treasure, we tend to take only the most minimal things from it. Again, imagine you find a pile of jewelry and all you get is a small 1 pound coin. Isn't it a shame? Yes, we cry for Imam al-Husayn. Yes, we attended the Majlis. Yes, we lamented and beat our chest and did all these things. But that's not enough. You have to be greedy when it comes to spiritual prizes. You can't be content with that. Don't be content with mediocrity, with just being a basic lover of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. Because I've said this before, everybody loves Imam al-Husayn. Who doesn't? There are Christians who walk from Najaf to Karbala. There are Yazidis who walk to Imam al-Husayn. There are Zoroastrians. There are people from all walks of life. In fact, there's a hadith in which Amir al-Mu'mineen says that only a believer loves me. As for Hassan and Husayn, believers and non-believers, faithful and the hypocrites, they all love Imam al-Husayn and Imam al-Hassan. In another version of the hadith, the Imam says, فَلَا تَجِدُ لَهُمْ ذَامًّا أو لَهُمَا ذَامًّا. You never find anyone criticizing Imam al-Hassan or Imam al-Husayn, or scolding them, or speaking in a foul manner against them. Everybody loves Imam al-Husayn. Is that enough? That's only the first stage. That's the first level. And so what needs to happen for us to reach the summits, like the companions of Imam al-Husayn, we need to step up. We need to ask for more. Because Imam al-Husayn, through his legend, which we are still processing, and I'm not just talking about the last 10 nights or 15 nights, I'm talking about the last 14 centuries. The most brilliant minds are still processing Ashura. It's not something you can write a blog post and say, yeah, these are the reasons Imam al-Husayn left, this is what happened, this is how it ended. The event of Ashura, the massacre of Karbala, is such that it continues to reverberate. It continues to unfold. It's like a massive star formation, right? When two black holes collide. That is not an instantaneous event. It's not something that goes on for like a month or 2 years or 10 years. It's still unfolding. It's still happening. The space-time continuum continues to expand under the banner of Husayn. We learned through him what the meaning of life is. We learned from Imam al-Husayn how petty this world is. We learned through Husayn who God is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes you're presented with an investment opportunity. And so they tell you that there's this great venture you could get into, you could make a truckload of money off of it. Depending on your level of confidence in the return on that investment, you will allocate a percentage of your investment fund or your net worth to invest. Usually they say 10%. Others have said 3%, 2% is all you invest in any single venture, right? That's what they say. The reason is you're trying to ensure that you want to minimize your losses, you want to diversify, you don't want to end up going bankrupt over one bad investment. That's how it works. And so if you have real faith in a particular investment, you'll increase the amount because you know that this is solid. This is definitely going to yield, massive returns. So instead of 3%, you put in 10%. If you really believe in it, you'll put in 20%. If you really, really believe in something, you'll probably put in 50%. Not advisable. They'll tell you, this is wrong, it's a mistake, you shouldn't do this. But because of your level of confidence in the investment, you will increase the proportion of money that you invest. Imam al-Husayn gave everything to Allah. He invested every fiber of his being for the sake of who? بذل مهجته فيك ليستنقذ عبادك من الضلالة وحيرة الجهالة. He gave the blood of his heart in your way, in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? To guide your servants from deviation and confusion and bewilderment and ignorance. In other words, this investment of Imam al-Husayn, which included his 6-month-old infant, what does that tell you about the investment? It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truly great. Truly great. As Zayd ibn Sawhan said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he fell in the battle of Jamal, Amir al-Mu'mineen came to him. He said certain things to him. He prayed for him. He asked for Allah's mercy to be bestowed upon him. Zayd responded to the Imam by saying this. He said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ashhadu anna Allah fi nafsika al-azim. I bear witness that God is held in high esteem in your soul. Through Husayn, we get to know Allah. Through Husayn, we get to know this world. We get to know our purpose. We get to know our objective. We get to know everything. The things that truly matter, you'll learn them through Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Now, once we have discovered the priceless treasure, then try to tap into it as much as possible. Invest our all into it. Okay? What then happens is something truly extraordinary. When news of the killing of Muslim ibn Aqil reached Imam al-Husayn, the Imam, historians say, فَاسْتَعْبَرَ الْحُسَيْنُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ بَاكِيًا. The Imam choked up. Remember, Hamida bint Muslim is right there. The other women and children, they don't know what's happened to Muslim. They're headed in the same direction. They're going to the same place. So the Imam's trying to hold his tears, but he couldn't. After all, Muslim was akhi wa ibn ammi, my brother and my cousin. But the Imam choked up. Ista'bara bakiyan. Then he burst into tears. Then the Imam said something. He said, Rahimallahu Musliman. May Allah bless Muslim. فَلَقَدْ مَضَى إِلَى رَوْحِ اللَّهِ وَرَيْحَانِهِ وَتَحِيَّتِهِ وَرِضْوَانِهِ. May Allah bless Muslim, for he has now transitioned into the gardens of paradise. He's now received God's mercy. He's enveloped by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he said this. He said, أَمَا وَإِنَّهُ قَدْ قَضَى مَا عَلَيْهِ وَبَقِيَ مَا عَلَيْنَا. This statement, not often mentioned unfortunately, is the key to success in this world and the next. The Imam says, Muslim did his part, قَضَى مَا عَلَيْهِ وَبَقِيَ مَا عَلَيْنَا. Now, this could mean one of two things, or perhaps both. He did what he needed to do. He carried out his responsibility, and now we have our responsibility that we need to carry out as well, meaning that we should go, head towards Karbala, fight and get killed and be martyred. That's one meaning. The other meaning is slightly more nuanced. It means Muslim fulfilled his obligation towards me, and now it's my turn to look after Muslim. Those of you who have been to Masjid Kufa, you know what I'm talking about. Muslim was thrown from the rooftop to the ground. Muslim was beheaded after that. His body was dragged through the streets and alleyways of Kufa. And yet when you walk into that majestic shrine of his, you look at that golden dome, you look at the Dharih, and you say, Lillahi al-izzatu wa lil-mu'mineen. They tried to humiliate him, and yet he is so honorable. The people of Najaf, the people of Iraq in general, they call him Abu Hamida, the father of Hamida bint Muslim. They go to his shrine, they ask Allah for their wishes and their needs, and Allah fulfills them through Bab al-Hawa'ij, Muslim ibn Aqil. Imam al-Husayn says, he did his part, now it's my turn. He gave his life for me, now it is the turn of the master of the youth of paradise to reward him for what he did, for his sacrifice. And we're only seeing parts of it. These are just tiny fragments, glimpses of the honor and majesty that the king of Kufa has, Muslim ibn Aqil. You see, brothers and sisters, there's a ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn. By the way, those of you going to Karbala, make sure you read Kamil al-Ziyarat by Ibn Quluwayh al-Qummi. Ibn Quluwayh was the teacher of Shaykh al-Mufid. His book is considered one of the most reliable ancient texts, which is confined to the topic of the devotional texts and ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt. If the book is about 500 pages, about 100 is allocated to the Prophet and all of the Imams, 400 pages to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. But it's not just ziyarat of Imam al-Husayn, it's also the etiquettes of ziyarah. How you're supposed to go, how you visit. Staying in lavish 5-star hotels is not how the Imams wanted us to go to Karbala. They wanted the ziyarah to be in sync with the angels who weep and cry, who are disheveled up on top of the dharih of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. Yabkuna wa yanuhun. This is a ziyarah. So the book is a highly recommended read. But in general, even if you're not going to read the book, which is available in English and other languages, but to just contemplate on the ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Not just Warith and Ashura and others, but every ziyarah. In fact, every time you go to the shrine, read a different ziyarah. In Mafatih al-Janan, there's plenty of them. In Kamil al-Ziyarat, there are even more. So read them, read the translation if you must, and contemplate, think. In one of these ziyarat, the Imam instructs us to say the following. He says, جِئْتُكَ يَبْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, O son of Rasulullah, I have come to you, وَافِدًا إِلَيْكَ, I have migrated to you. I've traveled long distances to reach you. Then you say, فَأَسْأَلُ اللَّهَ بِحَقِّكَ So I ask Allah, in your honor, in your name, by your wasila, I ask Allah بقضاء كل حوائجي, to give me all of my wishes and my desires. Any need that I have, any problem that is in my life, I want it all fixed. في الآخرة والدنيا. Not just the things that have to do with the afterlife, but also in this dunya. In other words, as I said before, Imam al-Husayn has the power to not just fix me and turn me into something that is worthy of God's mercy and compassion, but also fix all of my affairs. One of the expressions I always use when I go to the shrines is I say, Allahumma aslih li sha'ni kullah. Instead of listing all of the items, all of the problems that I have, I say, fix all of my affairs. Done. In honor of Husayn. By the grace of Husayn. By the close proximity of Husayn to you, O Allah. Fix them all. I can't fix them. How much do people try to address the problems that they go through, inevitably, throughout their lives? It's a rat race, right? If you're a child, you think to yourself, oh, these adults, they have everything they need. They don't need anybody's permission. They can do whatever they want. They have money. They have a car. They have a house, right? Whereas they're always locking us down. They're always not letting us do what we want, right? And so a child is always thinking, when I grow up, I'm going to do all these things. But what he doesn't realize is that as soon as he grows up, there's all these responsibilities, all of these problems, bills, you name it, right? But a child simply doesn't get it. And when you are a youth, for instance, you're like, as soon as I graduate, as soon as I get that degree, as soon as I buy that car, as soon as I get married, as soon as this or that or the other. And then once all of that happens, once you reach that milestone, you realize that your problems increased. Some problems were addressed, but new ones emerged. And so we're always chasing after that next milestone, that next big thing, not realizing that it's a rat race. We're like a hamster in a wheel. We keep spinning and spinning and spinning, thinking that we're going to get somewhere where it's going to be all hunky-dory, it'll be beautiful, trouble-free, pain-free, but we never get there. Why? الدنيا سجن المؤمن وجنة الكافر. This entire world, it's rigged. The game is rigged. Allah specifically designed this world to be uncomfortable. And as soon as we realize that this world is not a place for comfort and absolute ease and happiness and bliss, the sooner we will feel at peace. The sooner we will come to terms with these problems. Someone came to Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. He said to him, he started to complain. He's like, I have this problem, that problem. The Imam said to him, you know what your issue is? Your issue is that you desire the impossible. You know the Adidas slogan, impossible is nothing? There are lots of things that are impossible. That's just marketing jargon and it's rubbish. The Imam said to him, your problem is that you seek the impossible. He said, what do you mean? He said to him, تَتَمَنَّوْنَ الْمُسْتَحِيلِ تَتَمَنَّوْنَ الرَّاحَةَ فِي الدُّنْيا. You desire bliss and comfort in this world. But the world is not designed to give you bliss and comfort. That's what the akhirah is for. Where the laws of physics are mended and changed so that there is infinite bliss, or God forbid, infinite pain and misery. The akhirah is a completely different parallel universe. It encompasses this world. The traditional classical Newtonian physics that we're familiar with here, or even quantum physics, they don't apply in the akhirah. Allah suspends them, creates a whole new set of laws. But in this world, for you to desire comfort, absolute peace, you can't even go by a day that's completely trouble-free. Not a single day. I've mentioned this story before. There was a passenger on a plane. I was sitting next to him. And I recognize him because he's one of the richest people in that country where I was at. His net worth was like $12 billion. And so as we're talking, he's asking me questions about Islam. He's a non-Muslim. So then I said to him, I looked at him and he was dozing off. He looked tired. And it was like 4 in the afternoon. I said to him, what's going on? You look tired. What's up? It's only 4 o'clock. He was like, yeah, well, unlike you, my day starts at 3 a.m. Subhanallah. We can't be bothered to wake up for Fajr, let alone Salat al-Layl. And this guy wakes up every day at 3 a.m. And I have my conferences, and I have my meetings, and I have my calls, and I have this and that and the other. And so by the time people go to their offices at 9 o'clock, that's midday for me, right? And so at 4, yeah, I'm super tired. And I thought to myself, I don't have $12 billion, but I get a good night's sleep every single day. Alhamdulillah. The point is, you can have $12 billion, but not be able to sleep comfortably. Eventually, he got divorced and had to give half of his wealth away, which is another problem with like exorbitant amounts of wealth. But my point is, you can't go a single day without problems. We expect to live a life that's problem-free. It's not going to happen. When they grow even older, they're like, yeah, life begins at 60. Finally, I get to retire. I'm going to get access to my pension fund. I'm going to be able to travel the world. But what they don't know is that you're going to have arthritis. You're going to have, diabetes. You're going to have all kinds of issues that just don't give you this absolute, endless, boundless bliss and pleasure that you seek. It never comes. However, what Imam al-Husayn is able to do, there's a contract. The Quran even talks about this. إن تنصروا الله ينصركم ويثبت أقدامكم. If you support Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will then support you. من كنت مولاه فهذا علي مولاه اللهم والي من والاه وعادي من عاداه وانصر من نصره واخذل من خذله. If you support Ali ibn Abi Talib, it's the dua of Rasulullah. If you're someone who wakes up every day and one of the items on the list of agenda is how do I serve Ali ibn Abi Talib? How do I serve Imam al-Husayn? How do I serve the Imam of the time? Then you can rest assured that the dua of Rasulullah applies to you. In Ziyarat al-Yasin, we read the same thing. وَانصُرْ نَاصِرِيهِ وَخْذُلْ خَاذِلِيهِ. Oh Allah, support those who support him. I've seen this, by the way. I have seen people whose entire worldview is centered around the pleasure of Imam al-Zaman. They're all over the world, by the way. They're not restricted to Karbala or Najaf or Qom. I've seen them everywhere. They never miss dua nutbah, never miss dua al-ahd. They're not just du'as, but like even strategic as well as tactical decisions that they make in their lives. Like what career path I should choose, right? Who do I marry? Where do I live? Everything they do is somehow aligned and connected with whether or not this pleases the Imam of the time. No matter what they do, they think of it like their job, their business, their income, all these things. They live like everybody else. But all of those are secondary to them. The primary objective in their lives is learning about Imam al-Zaman, dispelling misconceptions that exist out there when it comes to the Imam as well as other religious topics, helping guide other people as the ulama do. That's the focus of their life. And believe you me, brothers and sisters, these individuals that I've met hundreds of, you look at their lives and subhanAllah, I'm not saying they're living an absolute paradise, but their lives are always better and more organized and somehow more pleasurable than everybody else's, than the average person's. Things just work out for them. وَانصُرْ نَاصِرِيهِ وَأَخْذُ الْخَاذِلِيهِ. You support the Imam of the time, Allah will support you. He will look after the other secondary issues in your life. Like Amir al-Mu'mineen says, it's a beautiful hadith. The Imam says, مَنْ أَصْلَحَ جوانيه أصلح الله برانيه. Whoever, instead of spending endless amounts of time and copious amounts of money on looking good, the cosmetics industry blowing up, plastic surgeries, all these desperate measures that, men, but especially women take to look good, to look nice, especially as they begin to age, right? But it's not just exclusive to the women, right? The men as well, the money they spend on all these designer clothes, all these fashion accessories, all these things, the car, the paint job, all these things, is why exactly? Because we're trying to look good and appealing, and you're trying to be a high value man or a high value woman. You're trying to make others like you, right? It's this crazy race for validation and for acceptance in the community, right? The Imam says, "Man aslaha juwani, aslaha Allahu barrani." You fix yourself, fix your soul, fix your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will look after your outside appearance. People will love you. They'll flock to you no matter what you look like. Our maraja, are they like supermodels? Are they the most beautiful people? And yet you love them regardless. I mean, you never think, this marja could probably do with like a nose job, right? And maybe they could. But does anybody care? Nobody cares. Because you see them as tiny grains of sand under the feet of Abil Fadl al-Abbas. You see them as conduits to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, people who teach and guide and dispel misconceptions. They are the ones that fight off the pirates of religion, that intercept the path of every believer. And there's plenty of those people out there. Pirates of religion, thieves of faith, trying to steal and snatch our connection to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Which, by the way, don't think this is a haphazard thing, that it just happened spontaneously. I was just reading a hadith to my friend, Brother Adil, may Allah bless him, who drove me here. The hadith says that when Imam al-Husayn was massacred on the plains of Karbala, bi-abi huwa wa ummi, Shaitan made a whistle. He whistled in such a manner that every single demon of his flocked to him. They all came, because it's almost like a siren, that something big just happened. So they all came to him. They said, "What happened?" He said, "We did it. We had Husayn killed. We had the fifth member of this holy household." Shaitan was familiar, very, very familiar with Imam al-Husayn. He could see the light of Husayn circumambulating the throne of Allah. So he always had this hatred and this envy towards the Ahlul Bayt. And so they were all killed one after the other. It was all down to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. The Imam said to them on the day of Ashura, he said, "If you roam the entire earth, you won't find a single son of a prophet other than me. And you're killing me." So Shaitan sounded the alarm, celebrated the fact that Imam al-Husayn had been killed. Then he said, "I have a mandate for all of you now. Our job is almost finished, though not entirely. There's one more thing you need to focus on." This is in the hadith. Guess what that was? He said, "Your job now is to devote every speck of your existence to sowing seeds of doubt about them." That's why I did a series a couple of years ago called Debunking Doubt. It's easy, really easy to say, who says this, who says that? This is shirk, this is haram. That's really easy. The hard part is trying to respond to it, right? Using evidence, using proof, text, scriptures. That's the hard part. But it has to be done. The ulama, they're the ones who protect us against these pirates, these thieves. And so, back to what I was saying earlier, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam reciprocates. He looks after you. I want to share a story with you, if I may. Not sure how much time we have left. Recite a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One of the ulama in the holy city of Mashhad, His name is Sheikh Mahmoud Oskoui. Rahmatullah alayhi, he passed away. He was a very highly sought after orator and speaker, in addition to being a mujtahid, which was actually a tradition in both Iran and Iraq for the longest time, where maraja' would become speakers, right? Now it's a jungle out there, especially in the West, where just about anybody sits on the pulpit. But this was a mujtahid, and incredible power of oratory, backed by a vast amount of knowledge. Reza Khan Pahlavi, the father of the last Shah of the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran. I don't know how much you know about him. Possibly those who are quite older, they're familiar with him. He was a savage. In a nutshell, an absolute savage. One of the things he did was that he banned religious attire, in other words, turbans and anything that resembled religious identity was banned. Then he banned the hijab for women. Then he banned the majalis of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. The ban lasted for 10 years. So much so that, like, imagine, hijab is banned, so how does a woman go out of the house? Well, she doesn't. 10 years. This is back in the day when they didn't have showers and bathrooms and whatnot. They had to go out. If they wanted to take a shower, they'd have to go to a communal bath, right? It was so incredibly difficult that some of these women ended up never leaving their homes for years and years. And now we just volunteer our hijab. Nobody even has to take it off. No government authority has to take it away from us. We just take it off ourselves. So, when the ban on the majalis of Imam al-Husayn was enacted that first year, like you all remember during the lockdowns, right? How painful was that? Not being able to go to the majlis, not being able to listen to the masa'ib of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. I mean, watching it online is one thing, but now imagine all majalis are banned, including in people's homes. So there was a lot of suppressed sadness and anger. One day, Sheikh Mahmoud receives an officer or some kind of official from the government. By the way, so the story starts like this. One of his students saw him on his deathbed. So he said to him, Shaykhna, you've done so many services in the way of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. May Allah bless you. He said, no, I'm leaving empty-handed. I have nothing. He said, you've done so much. He said, no, I've done nothing. And I don't have any certainty that Allah will accept anything that I've offered except one act, one deed. That one deed, if Allah is going to accept anything I've done, it's that. He said, well, care to tell me, care to share? He said, yes. When the ban was instituted on majalis, I decided to go to Mashhad. I have a little farm outside the city. I said to myself, I'm just going to go there and spend that time with my family. I'm not going to recite any majalis. I'm not going to do any masa'ib, anything like that. He said, so it was the 9th of Muharram when somebody came, and he was an official. He said, the governor of Mashhad wants to see you. And he wasn't asking. So I got in the car. We drove to the governor's house or office. He said, when we got there, the governor said, look, every year, I know this year we've had no majalis and it's banned, and obviously no one can do this. But it's customary that in the shrine of Imam al-Ridha, every year they do something called Nawhakhani, like Marsiyah, right? So we'd like you to do the Marsiyah. However, there are some strings attached. The first condition is you don't recite any masa'ib. You don't make anybody cry, because that's all banned. And in addition to that, we want you to restrict your speech to be about the bravery of the Ahlul Bayt, bravery of Imam al-Husayn, bravery of Imam Ali, and link that to Reza Khan Pahlavi. In other words, you should present him as the embodiment of the bravery of the Imams. No tears, no crying, no lamentation, nothing. Then he said to him, by the way, if you break any of these conditions that I've just stipulated, we won't just drag you off the minbar and take you to prison. We have somebody with a gun pointed at you. We'll kill you right there because this is live. This is in the courtyard of Imam al-Rida. So just to be clear, we're going to kill you. And this is Raza Khan. So the Shaykh said, I'm not going to do it. He said, I'm not asking. You have to do it. So the Shaykh said, I didn't know what to do. I was confused. I don't want to get up there and praise Raza Khan. And, what are my choices? So I went straight to the shrine of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. I said to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, hold my hand. Help me out here. So then on the day of Ashura, he was brought into the shrine. He said, when I came, I saw the minbar there. Imagine if this is the minbar. You've got the shrine of Imam al-Rida behind the minbar. All the officials are seated in front, and everybody else, all the zuwar, are sitting on the side. He said, the first thing I did was I went straight to the dharih of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. Excuse me. He said, I went and sat on the minbar. But instead of having my back towards the shrine and my face towards these officials, I sat sideways. So the shrine of the Imam was to my side and the people were in front of me. He said the place was packed. Imagine, after a year's worth of suppression, no majalis have been heard. It's the day of Ashura. It's the shrine of Imam al-Rida. People were there and they were about to burst. But I'm not allowed to make them cry. I'm not allowed to mention any masa'ib. So what does he do? He said, I looked at the people. I said, Ayyuhan nas! You're not allowed to cry for Imam al-Husayn. He said, people burst into tears. He didn't break any laws. He said, you're not allowed to cry for Aliyun al-Akbar. People cried. You're not allowed to cry for Aliyun al-Asghar. People cried. He said, right there in front of me, I saw 4 people pass out and they had to drag them out. The whole shrine was shaking. He said, after that, I felt that this was my moment. I said, tell Raza Khan Pahlavi that there have been many tyrants who came before you, who tried to extinguish the light of Imam al-Husayn. Look at what Imam al-Husayn did to them. Look at where they are today and where Imam al-Husayn is. And if you don't heed my advice, if you continue down this path, the same thing will happen to you. Tell him from Sheikh Mahmoud Uskui. He said, then I got off the minbar. The entire courtyard of Imam al-Rida was now, in tears and screaming. I went straight to the dharih of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. He said, I got there, I held the dharih. I said, Ya Imam Raza, man kar khodam kardam, shoma kar khodotun bokonit. I did what I had to do. Now I'll leave you to do the rest. Remember this statement. He said, then I went straight to the car, drove back to my farm. So far, nobody came, nobody tried to kill me, nobody tried to touch me. But obviously, the tables are turned. It's like when Lady Zainab delivered her sermon in the court of Yazid, or Imam Zayn al-Abidin. He said, I went back to my farm. I didn't even take my turban off. I sat there waiting for them to come and apprehend me. An hour passed, no one came. 2 hours passed, no one came. It got, the time was late. It was now dark. He said, I didn't sleep for a minute all night long. Because at any moment, they could have come and arrested me or killed me. He said, then after Salat al-Fajr, I heard nothing. So I stuck my head out the door, took a peek outside. There's nobody there. So I came out, just scouting the area. He said, suddenly I had a neighbor, also had a farm there, who happened to be the head of the Chamber of Commerce or some other, official agency in Mashhad. He said, as soon as I saw that guy, he looked at me, he said, Shaykh, you did your part, Imam al-Rida then did his part. He repeated the same statement. I said, what are you talking about? He said, after you went, the governor he summoned us, all the top officials, the general security. He brought us all together in a meeting. He said, what do we do with this sheikh now? Tell me, I need ideas. So one of them said, we should have him executed just like we told him. The other said, we should have him sent to Reza Khan and see what Reza Khan does to him, right? Let him kill him. It was all basically the same sorts of ideas that were being presented, each one doubling down. Then when they were all finished, he said, the governor said, you know what? The Reza Khan that I know, if he finds out what we did and how we put ourselves in this position and what the sheikh said about him, he won't just kill the sheikh, he will kill all of us. So we might as well just sweep this under the carpet, never tell anyone about it, end of discussion. He said, Ya Shaykh, you did your part, Imam Rida did his part. The Ahlul Bayt reciprocate. They're so generous. Whatever you offer in their way, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant. And yet, look at how the nation of Rasulullah treated them. One day they told Amir al-Mu'mineen that a man has beaten his wife. Just a regular woman, probably got into a fight with her husband. And the husband had raised his hand over his wife. What does the Imam do? The Imam went to his home. You probably heard the story. He knocked on the door. He said to him, why would you do this to your wife? Let her back in the house. She's standing outside. He'd thrown her out. He said, what's it to you? It's my wife. I'll do whatever I want. The Imam unsheathed his sword, Dhul Faqar. This is the ghayra of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That God forbid somebody touches a woman, someone hurts a woman, the Imam's Dhul Faqar comes out. Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, where were you on the day of Ashura? Ya Abul Hasan, on the way to Kufa and Sham, they did things which I can't even mention, except to really summarize and say, وَصَفَّدُوهُنَّ بِالْحَدِيدِ Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, they chained your women. وَكَانُوا يَدُورُونَ بِهِمْ فِي الْأَسْوَاقِ. You know, the Arabic expression, sabaya, we understand it as prisoners. We say prisoners of war. But sabaya has a different meaning. Sabi was to take someone from the enemy side and treat them as slaves. Which is why Lady Zainab in the court of Yazid, Ajarakallah, Baqiyat Allah, Ya Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. Had your aunt Zainab not said this, I wouldn't have the audacity to say it. She said to Yazid, you have treated us in such a manner, يَتَصَفَّحُ وُجُوهَهُنَّ الْقَرِيبُ وَالْبَعِيدُ. Strangers are checking out our appearance. They're trying to see what we look like. They're staring in our faces. Oh, is this what the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib looks like? They brought a group from Iran back in the time of the second Khalifa. These were royal women. These were daughters of the king of Iran. They brought them. They had them stand on a pedestal, on a platform. The Khalifa said, now take off their hijab, take off their face covering, let everyone see them so that if anybody wants to take them as slaves and buy them, they can do that. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the first to rush and say, these are noble women, you're not allowed to do that, even though they weren't Muslim. He said, these women have nobility and royalty. These women have self-respect. You can't do that to them. And yet, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, they brought them all into the court of Yazid alayhi la'natullah. They had the women and the children. Look at Yazid on his throne. Every Muslim knows that you don't place the Quran on the floor. You never extend your feet in the direction of the Quran. And yet that accursed man had the head of Abu Abdullah in a bowl placed in front of him. I won't say what that evil, wicked man did. All I will say is this. I don't know at what point the 3-year-old daughter of Abu Abdullah realized that her father had been killed. Did she see him in the court of Yazid or not? I'm sure she did. Imagine all along the journey. She says, as soon as I see my father, I'll tell him what they did to us. I'll tell him how they whipped my Aunt Zainab. Just wait until I see my father, Abu Abdullah. And yet here she is looking at the golden bowl with the head of her father placed in it. I believe that Imam Husayn's 3-year-old died in the court of Yazid. She would not have made it until the morning even if they hadn't sent that head. But when they went to the ruins of Sham, these walls looked like they were about to collapse over their heads. The women and children, they're crying and weeping. But this little 3-year-old is crying more than anybody else. Lady Zainab is trying to get her to sleep, to calm down, but she wouldn't. Eventually, somehow, maybe it was the journey, maybe it was the events that happened that made her so exhausted she fell asleep. She sees her father in her dream. She awoke saying, Aina walidi, where is my father? I won't have it, I want to see my father. Ya Sahib al-Amri wal-Zaman. They bring the bowl. They uncover the cloth. Again, I won't say what they had done to the head of Abu Abdullah. At first, she is shocked. She stands up and walks a few steps backwards. Then she embraces the head. Aba man alladhi aytamani ala sighari sinni. Father, who made me an orphan at this age? Father, your beard was all black. Why is it red now? لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إلهنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. يا الله عجل اللهم فرج إمام زماننا. اجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومقوية سلطانه وارزقنا الشهادة بين يديه. اللهم ارحم موتانا وموتى المؤمنين. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين واحشرنا مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين. اللهم احفظنا واحرسنا من كل سوء ومن فتن آخر الزمان. اللهم وارحم من مضى من هذا الجمع والعلماء والصالحين والشهداء وخدمة أبي عبد الله الحسين. إلى أرواحهم نهدي ثواب المجلس وثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
Ya Husayn, 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 Husayn, Ya 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 जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, 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 हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने, हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने पुकारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, मुझे बालों से पकड़ कर है तमाचे मारे, मुझे बालों से पकड़ कर है तमाचे मारे, मैंने सरशेम से मांगा जो तुम्हारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, वो जो दुआ अपने तोहफे में मुझे बख्शे थे, वो जो दुआ अपने तोहफे में मुझे बख्शे थे, उनको बेदर्दी से जालिम ने उतारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, आपके सीने पे आराम से सोने वाली, आपके सीने पे आराम से सोने वाली, सो के अब खाक पे करती है गुजारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने, हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने पुकारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। सात रहवारों के दोहराया गया है मुझको, सात रहवारों के दोहराया गया है मुझको, चूर जख्मों से बदन मेरा है सारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। मेरी गुर्बत पे चचा जान का सर रोता है, मेरी गुर्बत पे चचा जान का सर रोता है, उनकी गुर्बत में करूं कैसे गवारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। खैनों के नेज़ा पे उसे देखूं तो देखूं कैसे, नो के नेज़ा पे उसे देखूं तो देखूं कैसे, मेरा असग़र था मुझे जान से भी प्यारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने, हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने पुकारा बाबा, जब मुझे दिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आप ने है मारा बाबा। बेकफन आप हो बेकफन रहेगी बेटी, बेकफन आप हो बेकफन रहेगी बेटी, एक जैसा ही मुकद्दर है हमारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। है ये सदा कब्र से मासूमा की आई मोहसिन, ये सदा कब्र से मासूमा की आई मोहसिन, साथ कायम के चले आना दोबारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा, जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने, हर तमाचे पे सकीना ने पुकारा बाबा। जब मुझे आपके दिल ने है मारा बाबा। जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। जब मुझे आपके कातिल ने है मारा बाबा। या हुसैन
Husayn, Ya Husayn. Can you use this? Ya Husayn. सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। खून आँखों से बहाता है, खून आँखों से बहाता है, ये सर किसका है। जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, जिस तरफ जाता है बाजार में सर अकबर का, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, उस तरफ देखता जाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह का सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, चलते चलते जो सकीना कहीं गिर जाती है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है, खुद को नेज़े से गिराता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं हरंग, जब भी दाखिल किसी बाजार में होते हैं हरंग, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, पहला पत्थर यही खाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है। सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बच्ची को, रात होती है तो मासूम सी एक बच्ची को लोरी नेज़े से सुनाता है, लोरी नेज़े से सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता, ये सर पढ़ के कुरान की आयत सरे ज़ैनब से, पढ़ के कुरान की आयत सरे ज़ैनब से, ध्यान लोगों का हटाता है, ध्यान लोगों का हटाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर, ये समा काश न देखे कोई कहर उसकी, ये समा काश न देखे कोई कहर उसकी, शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है, शिम्र जुल्फों से उठाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है, सूरह काफ सुनाता है, ये सर किसका है, या हुसैन या
पर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मोहम्मद। अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या नबी अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अला अली अमीरुल मुमिनीन, अस्सलामु अला फातिमत ज़हरा सय्यदति निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अला खदीजतुल कुबरा उम्मुल मुमिनीन वल मुमिनात, अस्सलामु अला अबी तालिब, अस्सलामु अला मौलाना इमाम अल हसन अल मुज्तबा सिब्त रसूलिल्लाह व रैहानतिhi व सय्यद शबाब अहलिल जन्नह, अस्सलामु अला इम्मतिल हुदा मिन वल्दिल हुसैन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु, अस्सलामु अलैका या अबा अब्दिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न रसूलिल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न अमीरिल मुमिनीन व इब्न सय्यिदिल वसिय्यीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्न फातिमत ज़हरा सय्यिदति निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाया इब्न मौलाया गरीबल गुरबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मुईन अद्दुअफा वल फुक़रा, अस्सुल्तान अबुल हसन अली इब्न मूसा अर्रिदा, कुन शफ़ीअना व शफ़ीअ वालिदैना फ़ी यौमिल जज़ाइ व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु, अस्सलामु अलैका या हुज्जतल्लाहि फ़िल अर्दि या साहिबल अस्रि वज़्ज़मान, सय्यिदी अल अमान अल अमान अल अमान मिन फ़ितनतिज़ ज़मान, अस्सलामु अलैका या खलीफ़तर रहमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या शरीकल क़ुरआन, अस्सलामु अलैका या कअबतल ईमान या इमामल इंसि वल जान, अज्जलल्लाहु तआला फ़रजक व सहलल्लाहु तआला मख़रजक व ज़ुहूरक व जअलना मिन अंसारिक व अअवानिक व शियअतिक व मुहिब्बीक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहु। बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। अल्लाहुम्मा
कुल्ले वली काल हुज्जत इब्नुल हसन सलवातुका अलैहि व अला बाए बिहातिहि साती बिकुल्ले सा वलियान व हाफिज़ा व कायदान व नासिरा ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه عرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين علي ولي الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المعصومين حجج الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأمل حي على خير الأمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا وعملي سارا وعيشي كارا ورزقي دارا وأولادي أبرارا واجعل عند قبر نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين الله
إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صل على محمد أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وتوب يا محسن قد أتاك. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر، إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف الذليل. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام بجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله يا محسن قد أتاك المصيفة تجاوز. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن الإصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله لا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس، السلام عليك يا انيس النفوس، ايها المدفون بارض طوس يا ابا الحسن يا لابن ثر روحي وجسمي قلبي لك الفداء، السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الاسر والزمان، سيدي الامان 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 من فتنه الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القران، السلام عليك يا خليفه الرحمن، السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat. The question and answer session is going to start in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if we can all please be seated at that time. Jazakallah. Salawat. put the number on this screen? They've already put it. It's on. Put it with the camera on it as well. So meaning live feed is on.
We use this password, just shakes me, keep on shaking me.
Yes, I need somebody in the hall.
Password, you're going to introduce me, no?
Okay, yeah. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you so much for attending the question and answer session. We've got a number up on the screen, so you can either send your questions up in there, or we will have a floating mic round. So if anybody wants to ask a question, put your hand up and a volunteer will come and give you the microphone. If we could start with the ladies, please, if possible. So we'll start ladies first, if they can ask a question. If not, we can pass it over to the gents. Salawat. No? Okay. Anybody want to ask a question in here? Yeah, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sayyid, I have two questions, but I'll let you choose if you want to answer both or one by one.
Sure.
Let others have a chance. What is the difference between the hayat of Imam Zamana and the hayat of other Aimma who have attained Shahada? This is the first question. The second question is, I've learned through the various majalis the belief that there needs to be a hujjah on the earth for us to receive Allah's blessings. So before the Aimma, before the Chaharda Masumin Rasulullah and the 12 infallible Imams in the Sa'at of Sayyid Zahra, was the hujjah through which the earth was receiving its blessings and the people, was it the prophets and the awliya of the prophets, or was it also through the wasila of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, even though they were not born at the time, and that their zawat were still somehow the wasila through which these blessings were being received by the people and the universe by and large? Shukran.
Ahsantum. So I'll take the second question. The question is, we know that at any given time there is a hujjah of Allah, a proof of Allah, a vicegerent who represents the creator of the universe, and people have to recognize him, they have to know him and acknowledge him and believe in him. And that bit is beyond question. The famous prophetic hadith states, "Man mata la ya'rif imam zamanihi, mata mitatan jahiliyyah." Whoever dies without knowing the imam of his time will die a death of ignorance. Imam al-Sadiq elaborates. He says, "Mitata kufrin wa nifaq," a death of disbelief and hypocrisy. In other words, it doesn't just mean that the person will die as though he or she died in the time of ignorance. No, it literally means that they are in a state of utter ignorance when they die. And it's not acceptable for them to just meet God having believed in the Prophet, for example, but not the Imam of their time. And so that's indisputable. The question is prior to the Holy Prophet. And we do have narrations that say that before the time of Rasulullah, in fact, there is no time when there is no hujjah to represent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, think about it. Allah created this world, and then before creating humans, He created a hujjah. Right? إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am appointing a successor on this earth. So the succession and the representation and vicegerency of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began before humans were even created. So there is always a hujjah of Allah, and that hujjah is the one that must be recognized and must be acknowledged and accepted. Of course, we also know that there have been periods of so much ignorance and confusion that that people just simply didn't recognize the hujjah. And this includes the fatra. And fatra is the period between Prophet Isa alayhi salam and our own Prophet, the Messenger of Allah, the Prophet of Mercy, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And the fatra, which literally means period, but basically it encompasses roughly about 600 years from the time of Rasulullah to from the time of Isa to the time of Rasulullah. Now, were there hujjaj back then? Absolutely. We also have hadiths that state every prophet of God not only had one successor, because this is what the Quran suggests, that every prophet had a successor, but rather they had 12 successors. And it's quite interesting, but also heartbreaking to mention this hadith, that in the time of the second Khalifa, a Jewish man comes to Medina and he goes straight to the Masjid of Rasulullah. So he says, do you have, where's your prophet? I'd like to meet your prophet. I have some questions for him. And so they tell him that our prophet has passed away. He said, does he have a successor? And so they tell him, well, here's the Khalifa, he's on the minbar, you can talk to him. Rather, it was the first Khalifa, if I'm not mistaken. So the Jewish man says, can I ask you a question? Did your prophet appoint a successor? He said, no, he didn't. He just left it up to us. And, you know, it was a democratic ballot involving about 6 people, not even the whole of Medina. And, you know, we got together and, you know, we decided that I should be the Khalifa. Of course, I didn't want it, but I was forced into it. So he said to him, you're a liar. So is your prophet if he failed to appoint a Khalifa. Because as far as we know, every single prophet appointed someone after him. I mean, it doesn't add up. Just the other day, I was telling someone, he had some doubts and called me and said, you know, I'd like you to respond to some of my questions. And one of them was about the succession. And I said to him, Musa leaves the Israelites for 30 days to go and receive the tablets, 30-day round trip. And yet he said to his brother, أخلفني في قومي وأصلح ولا تتبع سبيل المفسدين. Succeed me and my people. He's not even willing to leave his people for 30 days without a representative, without a successor. أخلفني, literally, right? Then of course 10 days were added, or 10 nights, and by the time Musa got back, they were already prostrating before the golden calf. The Samiri of that day deviated their path and made them worship an idol. And so the Holy Prophet is told in the Quran to say, وَمَا كُنْتُ بِدْعًا مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. I am not a prophet who has come up with a new innovative tradition. My sunnah is the sunnah of my predecessors. I follow the same tradition of previous prophets. If they appointed successors, so will I. So anyway, this Jewish man says to him, you're all a bunch of liars if you claim that your prophet didn't appoint someone. So he's walking out, disappointed obviously. Abu Dhar goes up to him. He says to him, you want to meet our prophet's successor? Come, I'll take you to his home. So he took him to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He sat there, first question out of his mouth, did your prophet appoint a successor or not? So he told him, just like all previous prophets, our prophet appointed a successor, but just like every previous nation, they rejected their successors, and so did this nation. As the prophet said, that you will follow the tradition of the Jews and the Christians, and you will follow them step by step. وَلَوْ دَخَلُوا حَذْوَ النَّعْلِ بِالنَّعْلِ وَلَوْ دَخَلُوا جُحْرًا. If they went inside a rabbit hole, you would follow them right into the same rabbit hole. So just as what they did to Harun after Musa left, they did to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Hope that answers that question.
So we've got a few messages on the text. So the first one is, can you give any practical day-to-day advice how to be living as Imam Husayn or Imam Mahdi help us in our everyday family lives, especially when trying to bring up children in a very secular society, when we are struggling to even convince our teenage children to pray?
I mean, that's a very open-ended question and requires a whole series of lectures. But I think the most obvious answer is there needs to be a connection made with Imam al-Husayn and the Ahlul Bayt in general on a constant basis. It can't just be, like this Jewish guy that I once met on a flight. It was a 14-hour flight. And as soon as he saw me, he said to me, "What are you?" Not even who are you, but like, what the hell are you? And I said to him, "I'm a Shia Muslim." So he's like, "I'm an Orthodox Jew." I said, "Sure, it's okay. We're cousins, right? Cousins do fight every once in a while. It's usually awkward reunions, but we are cousins after all." So he kind of felt comfortable. We sat there and we talked. One of the things he said to me was this. He said, "I'm not a practicing Jew because I don't think that our religion could have been revealed by a merciful God. These rabbis, they came up with half the stuff that is, our religious rituals and rites and whatnot." That's him saying this. Then he said, even though I'm not a practicing Jew, he goes, "They call me a holiday Jew. I show up to the feasts and I show up to the, whenever there is any kind of festivity, I'll be there. But don't expect any prayers or fasting or pilgrimages from me." I think it's important that the spirit of Ashura is extended throughout the year. One way to do that is with regular attendance to the Majlis, which alhamdulillah, I know that especially in the Khoja community, that's something that happens. It's wonderful to see. But in addition to that, ziyarah is critical. Ziyarah is mandatory. Scholars in the early period after the beginning of the greater occultation, their fatwa, because they were akhbaris and they went by the literal hadiths, their fatwa was that it's obligatory to visit Imam al-Husayn. It's not optional. It's just like Hajj, right? Obviously, their views have now changed and they say that it's highly recommended, right? So ziyarah is critical. And I know for a fact, anybody who's taken their children to ziyarah know that when you come back, they're different. They are touched by the spirit of Imam al-Husayn in a way that is tangible and visible. So that's also critical. But I think really the most important challenge that we have now is this. I feel that we're being torn between two extremes. On the one hand, there is extreme liberalism. There is this secular mindset that's pulling many members of the community, where Islam is essentially gutted and reduced to the bare bones minimum. It's a very minimalistic kind of religion. It's like, yeah, as long as your heart's, clean and you have faith in God and you're good to other people. So this extreme liberal secular kind of mindset is pulling many members of the community. On the other hand, you have those who don't feel content with this. And they're like, we need spirituality. What do they turn to? Sufism. They turn to deviant ideologies and beliefs which have been condemned clearly by the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt and which lead to incredibly detrimental beliefs in the end, where they start to think of themselves as some kind of demigods. And so the spiritual dimension is very strong and deviant, right? Rumi's Masnavi is the best-selling quote-unquote Islamic book in the world, in the Western world. And that's dangerous. And we're talking about a guy who says that Amir al-Mu'mineen will intercede for Ibn Muljam on the Day of Judgment. He exonerated Ibn Muljam. He said to him that, look, it's not your fault. You're going to kill me, sure, but it's not, this is not by your own accord. you are simply a dagger in God's hand, and He wants to kill me so that the beloved would be united with the loved and whatnot. All this Sufi, bumper sticker jargon. Make love, not war. The hipster slogans back in the 70s or 60s. So Ibn Muljam is not at fault. I mean, he's a great guy. In fact, he's a tool that's being used by God Himself. Yazid is not, sure, we curse him because he did something evil, but really Yazid, had it not been for him, we wouldn't be where we are. Imam al-Husayn wouldn't be the master of the youth of paradise. We owe Yazid. These are things that they're talking about now. Literally, that Yazid did us all a favor. And so even though we've been told to curse him, but we shouldn't curse him, we should curse his actions, because he is ultimately just a ray of sunshine connected back to the divine. And they always, make the language very flowery and beautiful and present it in a manner that makes it palatable. But you see how evil and demonic this is at its core. So my point, without going further into this subject, is that we are torn by all of these dangerous ideologies. And what remains at the very core, I always say, and I said this to our friend who called me, I said, look, if you're ever confused, the hadith says, عَلَيْكَ الْأَمْرِ الْأَوَّلِ. Always go back to the basic fundamental concepts that you're sure of. He said, like what? قال رسول الله إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي أهل بيتي. Stick to that. Hold on to that. The Holy Prophet says, ما إن تمسكتم بهما. This is tamassuk, mughallav. If you hold on firmly to the Quran and Hadith, both of them, they're equal. I wrote a whole book, it's in Arabic, where I stipulate 13, if I'm not mistaken, 12 or 13 similarities between the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. They're at the very same level as far as Rasulullah is concerned. So stick to what you know. Teach your children so that, as the Amir al-Mu'mineen says, بادروا أحداثكم لألا يلقكم إليهم المرجئة. Take the initiative. Make sure that they're vaccinated against these evil and demonic ideas and thoughts, so that you keep them on the path. And in the meantime, bring them to Majlis, help them, encourage them to get involved in the service of Imam al-Husayn, because the Imam looks after his people, right? Take them to ziyarah, and inshallah, leave the rest to Imam al-Zaman.
If anybody does have a question, please raise your hand so Shayan can pass you the microphone. In the meantime, we've got one here. Assalamu alaikum. My question is regarding your today's statement in the Majlis, where you said nowadays it's like a jungle of speakers on the mimbar. How can we protect our centers from such speakers? What should be our parameters? Youth get easily inspired or attracted towards famous and good oratory. They don't measure the content on the base of the knowledge of the Masumin alayhi salam.
Look, it's simple, really. It's not rocket science. Whichever field or discipline you want to use to solve a problem, you go to experts. If you're looking to fix an electrical problem in your home, you go to an electrician. That electrician has to be qualified. They have to have some credentials, right? I'm not sure how it is here in this country, but generally they have to have some kind of certification, okay? If you wanted a plumber, you'd get someone who's qualified in this area. My issue is, why is it that when it comes to the single most critical and important institution within our communities, which is that mimbar, suddenly qualifications don't really matter? It's basically, whoever has the oratory skills. Sometimes it's just if they could speak the language. And so there is no set vision for what makes a person qualified. And I know for a fact that centers are struggling with this. And it's not an easy problem to fix, especially now that it's become so relaxed and so flexible. So my suggestion is that, number one, we need to appreciate and acknowledge and accept that for anybody to deliver religious guidance, that person has to be an expert, right? They have to be qualified. If we can agree on that, I think we've taken a big step forward. Then the next question is, well, what qualifies a person for this role? And the answer to this has traditionally, historically been really simple. Someone who's put in the time and the effort, gone to the traditional Islamic institutions to study there for an extended period of time. Now, obviously, there are people who study there for 5 years in the Islamic seminaries. There are people who study there for 15 years. There are those who stay there for 40 years. So the level of expertise differs, just as when you go to a doctor who's just finished his residency, and that person might have the right qualifications. But if you were going to someone, if you had a condition that required only the best of the best, then you'd probably pick someone on top of the number of years they've put in to study in terms of their experience, okay? But there is a minimum level of qualification that has to be there. Can we also agree on that? And the minimum level of qualification involves spending considerable time in the Islamic seminaries. A university degree doesn't compensate for that, because we see how universities aren't trying to teach people about Islamic beliefs and guidance and whatnot. Universities study Islam as a socio-political phenomenon, right? It's always comparative. Even history is very comparative and subjective, despite their attempts to make it look like as though it's objective. It's not, right? Things like ChatGPT I think are a great example. When you ask a question to ChatGPT that involves controversial topics between various Islamic sects, you always end up with a disclaimer that says, look, this is a controversial topic, but generally speaking, you get the answer from the perspective of the majority of Muslims, right? Not the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Because the information, the language model that's been fed into it is those books, right? It's those sources. And I've been in, pretty heated debates with ChatGPT over this. So my point is that a university degree simply does not cut it. It doesn't cross that, it doesn't tick that box. So what you need is several solid years of study in the Hawza. Otherwise, you end up with a situation where people often get confused. And let me tell you something about the mimbar. Having done this for quite some time now, and having the honor of being at the service of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn and his servants, the mimbar is as much about what not to say as it is about what to say. And so the choice of topics, how you present those topics, the evidence that you provide, the books that you reference, what do you actually say to the audience that avoids the people, helps them avoid falling into doubt even more? As Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam says to one of his companions, he says, if you want to listen to someone who takes you from doubt to certainty. Sometimes you listen to somebody and you end up with more doubt. You end up thinking like, if this is not true and that's not true and that's not true. I mean, was Imam Husayn even thirsty on the day of Ashura? I've literally heard someone say that. Like, if the story of Hazrat Qasim's wedding is questionable, I mean, what about all the other stuff? Why even talk about subjects that would confuse the audience in other areas? You're supposed to provide them with certainty, not more doubt. So my point is that this is a highly nuanced, difficult, I once went to my endocrinologist, and I had problems with my thyroid. So he said to me, is your life stressful? What do you do for a living? I said, I have the most difficult job in the world. He thought I was going to say I'm like a rocket scientist or some astronaut or something. I said I'm a public speaker. He laughed. I said, no, it is the most stressful job in the world, because for me, I have to account for every minute that my audience members spend listening to what I have to say. I have to account for the fact that I'll be held to account by Allah for what I said. What to prioritize. I remember one of the things that always stressed me out is scholars say that if there are two important subjects to talk about on the pulpit, but one of them is more important than the other, it is haram to talk about the lesser. You have to talk about the one that's most important. Let alone subjects that have zero relevance to our religion. Clickbait, literally clickbait. Things that are meant to attract more views and, maybe a few cheers and claps and whatnot. My point is, this is such a difficult, delicate, challenging thing to do. And if we're going to simply delegate this to, whoever gets the crowds, it becomes problematic. It's an injustice. A community doing this to their audience, to their members, it's an injustice. And so what needs to happen really is for a policy to be drawn up, which includes these basic facts. Expertise, yes. How was the expertise acquired? How's the education? Actual how's the education? Yes. Right? Does the person at least resemble the ulama? I mean, why do we wear this? I remember once somebody asked me about the abaya. And they said, why do you wear this? Because Sunnis don't wear it. And I said, you know what? This has zero benefit. Zero benefit. The abaya, the cloak, must have had some benefits back in the day, in the time of the Prophet, in the desert, when there's like a sandstorm or something. It might have come in handy. But now, there's no benefit in it. The only reason I wear it is because Rasulullah used to wear it. Right? The turban is the same thing. We wear the turban because it follows the sunnah of Rasulullah, number one. And number two, historically, the turban is supposed to represent something. It's supposed to embody the fact that this person, has spent an amount of time in the hawza, learning from scholars. I could read books. Anyone could read books, right? I can take a medical textbook and read it. And I'm sorry I took too long on this, but I think it's important. Right? I can read a medical manual or textbook, but could I ever treat someone? Like legally, could I ever do that? It's impossible. Reading a book or even a bunch of books is one thing. Spending time in the company of righteous, pious ulama is another. Because the house is about these two things. It's about learning from these scholars by attending their classes, and it's also about spending time with them. You pick up their traits, their akhlaq. And so a good 5, 6, 7 years is an absolute minimum to be in their company, to actually sacrifice. It's difficult. Life is hard in the hawza, right? Those of you who visit Iraq get a sense of how difficult it is. But it's part of the rite of passage. To become a scholar, go to the hawza. Go through the difficulties and challenges that every other student goes through. It's the Quranic. I was just telling a brother here. The Quran says, فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٍ. The Quran's solution for tabligh in the community is that a group of these people, a group from every community, have to travel, go to the centers of learning, seek knowledge, وَلِيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. And when they come back, they then warn their people so that they may heed the warning. That's the Quranic solution. Reading a few books, watching a few YouTube videos just doesn't cut it. My apologies.
Thank you. Just changing the battery. With new styles of matams coming in, such as Saf matam and Iraqi styles having a fast-paced beat, to what extent does the style of matam change from grieving for Imam Husayn to just beating your chest to add a beat to the poetry stroke noha?
Look, the simple answer is, they asked Ayatollah Na'ini, who was the teacher of the late Ayatollah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khoi, and possibly the most senior alim in his day. They asked him, can we do this? Can we practice this ritual when it comes to matam? They asked him about specific items. And his response was that as long as you are not committing any acts of sin, right, then every community can commemorate Imam al-Husayn and mourn for his tragedy the way they know to, right? Their practices, their traditions are for them to apply, and there's nothing wrong with it. There are some styles of matam which are bizarre. I've seen, there's a village on the outskirts of Isfahan. They have a style of matam where they don't even beat their chests. They don't do any of that. They take 2 rocks and they jump up and down and hit those rocks against each other. It literally, like if you don't know this is matam, you'd think it's a, some kind of dance routine, right? But to them, this is matam. To them, this is almost like the, the drums, for instance, that Iraqis would use or Iranians. It's a means of announcing that this is a matam of Imam al-Husayn, right? So if they consider this to be matam and they're not committing any acts of haram, it's perfectly fine. So whether you beat your chest in a rapid manner or a slow manner, it really doesn't matter, as long as you're not committing something that's haram, or you're not desecrating Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, or you're not saying things, which I think is a bigger problem. Some of the poetry that we hear nowadays is downright ghulu. Some of the things they say are incredibly, detrimental and erroneous. And so that, I think, is what we need to be worried about, more so than how we beat our chest.
Thank you, Sayyid. Salam. A lady has committed a grave wrong by treating a close relative badly and they have passed away. She feels deep regret but just can't move forward from that depressed regret. What hope and steps should the lady take?
So what was the first part of the question?
She's committed a grave wrong. So she's hurt badly to the person and the deceased person.
Yeah. Or to her grave?
While she was alive, she's hurt them.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, I mean, we have a hadith that say that a person might be considered a good son or daughter to their parents in their lifetime, but after they die, they become aq, meaning they're disowned by their parents. Once the parents have died, they become disowned, and vice versa. So they asked the Imam how. He said that after they die, they should remember them and they should pray for them just as they looked after them when they were alive. Otherwise, you could be considered disowned if you abandon and neglect them. So based on this, I would say that when a person dies and you feel this sense of guilt about how you treated them when they were alive, really the best thing to do is to pray for them, to visit their grave, to do good deeds and a'mal and so forth on their behalf. And inshallah, on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reconcile between the two of you. And we have a hadith that on the Day of Judgment, if 2 mu'mineen had any beef or problems with each other, and Allah wanted to forgive both of them, He would simply offer them an upgrade. He would say that you're supposed to get this in paradise, but I'll give you such and such if you forgive this brother or sister. And so they'll forgive them, because there's no point in holding grudges, especially in paradise.
Thank you, Sayyid. Taqleed, is this wajib or is it sufficient for one to use the resource by various marjas to live his or her life, especially for a new Shia Muslim?
So I don't think the question was so much about taqleed as it was about tab'eed, because taqleed, well, refer to the first question. Are you an expert? Ijtihad is the equivalent of 6 or 7 PhDs, right? For you to say that I could just, pick up the Quran and books of hadith and derive or extrapolate my own rulings is absurd. It's like trying to perform brain surgery on yourself. It's just impossible. It doesn't make any sense. So taqleed is established. There's no question. The Imams, I mentioned this in one of the Majlis in the 10 days of Muharram. I talked about why the Imams didn't write books. Have you ever thought about that? You'd think that the Imams could have put an end to so many disputes by simply writing books, as opposed to, as opposed to the oral tradition of speaking to their companions, and then the companions, like this whole thing about ilm al-rijal and sanad and so forth would have been useless, rendered useless, had the Imams written actual books. One of the reasons the Imams didn't write books is because they wanted people to refer to the ulama. They wanted people to refer to the scholars, to the jurists. They wanted this to become a tradition and a part and parcel of the Shi'i lifestyle. And in fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. They say that when they used to send questions, istifta'at, as we do now, to Sayyid Burujirdi, rahmatullah alayh, who was perhaps the last supreme marja of the entire Shia world. Because even now you have multiple maraja. There might be some who are bigger than others, but Sayyid al-Burujirdi was the only undisputed marja of the entire Shia world. So they would write to him and they would ask him questions. His response to the questions was always written in an almost cryptic manner. You know how the Risala now, when you read it, you need a teacher, you need somebody to help you understand it. And you think to yourself, I mean, if this is supposed to be for the, for the masses, then surely it could have been written in a more, flowy kind of manner. So Sayyid Burujirdi would respond in a very technical way. And it was difficult for the average person, for the person who sent the question, to understand the answer. So once one of his students said to him, why do you write like this? I mean, can you simplify it so that they understand? He said, the reason I write the answers like this is to make the person who asked the question refer to the local alim to explain it to him. I want to connect the community to the local alim, the resident alim, or the local representative of the marja. Because I want them to be in charge. I want them to be the ones that provide guidance and support for the community. So if everybody just wrote directly to me and I responded to them, then what's the local alim going to do? Right? People need to understand that his role is critical. So that's one thing as far as taqleed is concerned. But if the question is, can we pick and choose a la carte between the various maraja and practice what's called tab'id? For the most part, maraja say that's not possible. You have to identify the most knowledgeable marja and follow him. Although there are exceptions. In other words, there are maraja who say that that's not obligatory, but generally speaking, the consensus, if you like, is that you have to follow one marja and he needs to be the most qualified.
Assalamu alaikum. Question for Maulana, please. How was Mukhtar able to gather an army during his revenge for Karbala, in which people were ready to face difficulties and give up their lives, yet the same people did not come forward when Imam Husayn asked them to? Was the event of Karbala and the Qutbas of the Ahlul Bayt the sole reason for their awakening, or were they motivated by personal loss and other reasons? How did Mukhtar get them to obey, follow, and not abandon the mission? Quite a long one.
No, well, the answer is going to be a short one. Essentially, it was a combination of the above. The sermons of Lady Zainab and Imam al-Sajjad, they turned the tables around. And by the end, reports say that the entire crowd in the court of Yazid was weeping. They were sobbing, crying for Imam al-Husayn. Which is at that point that Lady Zainab said, "Ubku kathiran wadhaku qalila." You cry now after what you've done, after your desertion and your abandonment. So with those sermons, with the efforts of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, things began to change. And that image of Yazid being the sixth successor to Rasulullah was completely shattered. And here's a person who was openly drinking beer and saying that I have avenged my forefathers. Rasulullah never received any revelation. I mean, he was openly coming out as this, filthy and despicable human being. So whatever vestiges of beatitude and respect and sanctimony, all these things were completely shattered. One. Number two, the reason the Tawabin rose and went with Mukhtar to fight Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad is because of this deep sense of remorse. It's the idea that we participated in the killing of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. We now need to redeem ourselves. And so the circumstances aligned in such a manner where there were now a lot more people willing to stand up and fight. Some of them motivated by the desire for redemption, others motivated by the desire for revenge, others motivated by the mere fact that Yazid was not qualified and Yazid had to be overthrown. And so a combination of factors, Yazid himself, he attacked Medina, he killed 1,000 companions, he then went after Mecca, he catapulted the Kaaba. But all of these things, essentially, and the greatest of these heinous crimes was the killing of Imam al-Husayn. When the story began to spread about what had happened in Karbala, what they had done, those heinous crimes and egregious aggressions against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, a lot of people chose to stand up and to defend the sanctity of Rasulullah.
Thank you. There is much reference in the Quran and Ahadith regarding the physical hijab of a woman. Apart from the rule of one glance, is there any reference in Quran and Ahadith regarding the physical hijab requirements for men?
The biggest injunction in the Quran vis-a-vis hijab is the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنْ. So hijab really begins with sealing your eyesight and not looking, not taking a glance. And at this level of hijab, it applies equally to both men and women. It's quite unequivocal. It's very clear in the Quran. In fact, it starts with the men, don't look, and then the women, they're not supposed to look either. However, when it comes to our ahadith, yes, there are hadith that stipulate that the extent to which a man can reveal his body, and that women are not supposed to be looking at those body parts. Like for instance, shirtless men, it's haram for a woman to look at that, or even the legs, and which is what makes watching sports and whatnot pretty problematic. So we do have that, but let's not forget one thing. I kind of understand why sisters would want to emphasize, male hijab. But the reality is that unlike most animals, it's the females in the human species that are attractive and beautiful and so forth, not the other way around, for the most part, right? There are exceptions. I think I'm one of them. But anyway, so this is why hijab for women is emphasized to a much greater degree than men, right? Because it's the women that have this appearance that can be used to detrimental ends and can be seductive and whatnot. So the hijab of a woman is stressed a lot more than the hijab of a man, or so-called hijab of a man. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And the other day somebody said to me, why is it that a woman has to wear hijab even when there is no man around if she's going to pray in the state of salah? I said, exactly. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be covered up even when there is no one to see you if you're going to pray. Salat has its formalities. Salat has, it's almost like when you have some professions, you have to wear a uniform, right? This is your uniform. This is you saying that I am in a state of devotion and supplication and prayer. Allah wants you to look like this. And so it's not about men, it's about how Allah wants to see you.
So, Salam, what is your opinion when fruits and other items are rotated during Muharram and people doing salam to it?
I'm not quite sure what that means, but people doing salam to fruits. I see. That's kind of weird. Yeah, so I've never seen that, so I can't really comment on that. Okay. Okay. Oh, so they touch the fruits and then they eat them, or they just keep them there? Okay. Yeah, look, I mean, it's not haram, you know. It's not. It doesn't violate any religious rules. And if I am seeking blessing from this, it's just like the taboot at the end of the day. Is it wrong to seek blessings from the taboot? No. If the shirt of Yusuf can cure blindness, right? The taboot of Ali al-Akbar and Hazrat Qasim and Abil Fadl al-Abbas, seeking blessing from it, just like seeking blessing from the dharih of Rasulullah or the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam. Imam al-Hasan was poisoned 7 times, and every time he was poisoned, he went and he took his shirt off and placed his chest on the dharih of Rasulullah or the grave of Rasulullah, and he was cured. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's no shirk involved. There's no, polytheism of any kind, because I'm not treating the fruit, this peach or banana, as some kind of a deity, right? People understand that this is part of the rituals of Imam al-Husayn. They're part of the sha'air of Imam al-Husayn. It's a sha'ira. It's something that reminds you of what? Of Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam. And so seeking blessing from that, absolutely nothing wrong with it. The worst case scenario is there's no blessing and you eat the peach and the banana.
Salam. What would happen if I ate something that I didn't know was haram, but later found out it was? Would I lose the acceptability of 40 days worth of my prayers?
If you didn't know, there's a big difference between knowing sin. Knowingly committing a sin is one thing, and inadvertently falling into a situation like this is another. In fact, there are ulama who say that al-athar al-wad'i, is what they refer to the impact, the ramifications of a sinful act. And so some scholars say that if I did not know that what I'm eating or drinking is haram, even the spiritual impacts of this sin will not apply. They won't occur. The physical repercussions will apply. Like if I drank something and I didn't know it was poison, I'll still be poisoned. But if there are any spiritual ramifications, any spiritual side effects, then those spiritual side effects will not apply if I had no knowledge, if I didn't know. Does that make any sense? So inshallah you're good. Inshallah you're good.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Can you please give the names of any authentic Shia dream interpreters and authentic books and where I can buy them from?
Why be obsessed with dream interpretation? Dreams, the way this is how I would answer this question. If you see a dream that feels good and makes you think that good things are about to happen, say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah good things will happen. Be optimistic, be positive, hope for the best. If you see a dream that's disturbing, some kind of nightmare that leaves you in a state of panic, give sadaqah, pray 2 raka'at, gift it to Lady Narjis, the mother of Imam al-Zaman. Do something good. صدق الصدقة تدفع البلاء ولو أبرم إبراما. Sadaqah repels tribulations and calamities, even if they've been signed off on. When you give sadaqah, even if it's at the last minute, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repels calamities from you. Don't go trying to interpret every dream this is what fortune tellers do. This is people trying to find out what's going to happen for the rest of their lives. You're not supposed to know everything. You're better off not knowing a lot of things. right? Just leave it to Allah. Have tawakkul. Put trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do what's right. Do what you're supposed to do. And then leave the rest to God. But for me to try to understand exactly how things are going to turn out, that's an unhealthy obsession. I would avoid it. And there are no books that would give you dream interpretation. I should have started with that, I think.
I think we'll take this as the last question on text, and if there's any in the floor, then we can put our hands up. Salams, could you shed some light on the benefits of ziyarat of Sayyida Masuma?
Sayyida Masuma, Fatima bint Musa ibn Ja'far, alayhim as-salam, is a very special personality. The only other person aside from Fatima al-Zahra, about whom an infallible Imam has said, Fidaha abuha, may her father be ransomed for her, is Lady Fatima al-Ma'suma alayhi salam. Imam al-Kadhim said, Fidaha abuha. So she's undoubtedly a very significant personality. And the Imams have said, Manzara Ammati Fatima, whoever visits Fatima al-Ma'suma, falahul jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him at least the potential for paradise. Obviously, this doesn't mean that I could commit every sin under the sun. It means that Allah will grant you the honor of going to paradise if you try to avoid major sins and whatnot. In other words, she will intercede for you, she will vouch for you. And so Lady Ma'suma is a very special person. Another person I want to mention, since we're on this subject, is Fatima bint al-Hasan alayhi salam. Most people don't know much about her. In Iraq, they call her Sharifa bint al-Hasan. Have you visited Sharifa bint al-Hasan? You've been there? How much do you know about her? Okay. Suffice to say that Fatima bint al-Hasan, who there is some dispute as to her burial site, but the famous burial site that she has now is on the outskirts of Hilla. So it's about an hour's drive from Karbala. So you know you have to get a car or a bus to get there. But she herself, as a historical personality, is not disputed. She is the daughter of Imam al-Hasan, the wife of Imam al-Sajjad, the mother of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, which makes her the only person in the family of Rasulullah to have this kind of status. So the daughter of an infallible Imam, the wife of an infallible Imam, and the mother of an infallible Imam, which is not the case with Lady Fatima al-Ma'suma alayhi salam. She was there in Karbala. Ibn Asakir says that on her way back, as the caravan was coming back, she died and was buried in Hilla. So an incredible personality. I personally am obsessed with her, and every time we go to Iraq, I make sure I visit. And it's crazy. I'm sure you've seen this road that leads down to the shrine. It's about maybe 2 kilometers, and it's filled with placards and signs of people who have come here, they've prayed, and their hajat have been given to them. And so all these signs say, Shukran lillah wa li Sharifa bint al-Hasan, my son was cured. Shukran lillah wa li Sharifa bint al-Hasan, I got this and I got that. You go to the Dharih, you see medications, and these are people who came, they got their shifa, and they come and throw the medication and the boxes inside the Dharih. So make sure you visit her, inshallah, and make dua for me too.
Any questions on the floor? No?
You don't want to? Oh, okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, I see a common problem in the society that they don't know how to use their wealth. You know, there are many sufferings from earthquake, war zone areas, poverty, many such issues all around the world. But we see many enjoying their yearly holidays once a year, twice a year, or maybe they give a reason like a religious visit twice a year, thrice a year. But while performing those responsibilities, they are nowhere around. So how to convince them that Imam is going to ask them for this responsibility as well?
Okay, so you made a point there which I think is important to address. I think it's a mistake for us to pit charitable endeavors and philanthropic initiatives against other religious and faith-sanctioned activities like ziyarah. Ultimately, if I see somebody who goes to ziyarah 5 or 6 times a year, I tell him, God bless you, more power to you. The more you do it, the better. If that person has a responsibility, especially if they have a family member who's suffering, because Silatul Arham is also wajib. And scholars say that Silatul Arham begins with financial assistance, if I can do that. It's more than just calling them every once in a while on Eid and saying salam. Which is why the hadith says, La sadaqata lidhi rahimin muhtaj. If you have a family member, someone who qualifies as rahim, you can't even give sadaqah to the general public. You have to start with your own family members. So let's not pit different good deeds against each other. There is no conflict. Ziyarah is great, so is giving charity to the poor. As to encouraging people who are wealthy to contribute, I don't think they need encouragement. What they need is a realization that whatever we have is ultimately, it's God's property. And how much of it am I going to take with me to my grave? I'll tell you a story, in fact, very quick one. Is that the last question, or do we have more questions? Okay, so we'll wrap up with this. Sayyid Muhammad Ali Shahristani, rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, he was in London for many years. And then after the fall of Saddam, he went to Iraq. And he went and visited Sayyid Sistani. And the Sayyid told him, I want to appoint you as the person responsible for the renovation and expansion of all of the shrines in Iraq, which is an incredible honor that it's not something you get randomly, okay? He was pre-selected for that. May Allah bless him. So the first thing he wanted to do was to build the roof of the courtyard of Imam al-Husayn and Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas's shrine. So he went to Iran, and he gathered a group of about 50, 60 wealthy businessmen in Tehran. And he sat down with them and said that we need to raise, I think it was $15 or $20 million for this project. So they fundraise, and you know how it is. Somebody says, I'll give you 100,000. Another one says 20,000. This says this. But obviously you need a significant donation. You need capital, injection of cash. This isn't something small. So they raise about 15 out of the 20 million. So then he's pushing and pushing, and they're trying to get the other 5 million. And he says there was this guy who was sitting in the corner, very quiet, didn't say a thing. He said, how much more is left? They told him 5 million. So he called his son. He said, son, right there. He's like, son, sell my factories, sell the whole business. Will we be able to come up with $5 million? He said, yeah, we should be able to. He's like, sell it all. Who does that? So it took a couple of months. He came up with the money, 5 million, gave it to Sayyid Muhammad Ali. And then he went to Iraq, and they finished the project. It took about, a year or two. Then they invited the donors to come and visit the shrine and see what they had contributed to. The group walks into the courtyard of Imam al-Husayn, including this person who sold his entire business to contribute. As soon as he walked in, he looked up and said, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, then fell to the ground and died. Think about this for a moment. God knows, did he have any indication that he was going to die? Was there any sign? Maybe, maybe not. But then, خطرات تخطر على قلبي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes lights this spark in your head. And you feel like, I have to do this. Even if it's selling my entire business. But I want to do this. I want to contribute. Had he not done that, he would have died the same day anyway. But Allah chose to guide him, to bless him, to make this contribution, not lose a thing, because he would have died and lost everything anyway. But now his wealth is right there upon the roof of the shrine of Imam al-Husayn. I think, and this is not exclusive to people who are rich or wealthy, really. It applies to all of us, because it's a proportion, isn't it, right? If I have 100,000 and give 1,000, it's the same as someone with 1,000,000 giving 10,000. It's exactly the same. So each one of us should ask themselves, like, what do I want to do with this money? What's going to happen to it? I mean, growth, expansion, more investments, more business, but then what? To what end? If I see a good cause, if I can actually relieve the suffering of believers, mu'mineen, lovers of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, if I can uphold the memory of Imam al-Husayn in as many places as I can, if I can contribute to a student studying in the Hawza who's going to end up becoming a preacher and someone who, promotes the message of Imam al-Husayn, whatever it is, right? A smart strategic investor is someone who sits down, number one, identifies the most important things he can do, diversifies as well. I call it Islamic capitalism, right? You try to diversify your investments, find things that would yield maximum return, right? In terms of thawab, that is. And then do your best, inshallah. May Allah give us the tawfiq to do that and to serve Imam al-Zaman as best as we can, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sayyid, for joining us. I know it wasn't in the original plan, the question and answer session, so thank you for being so accommodating. Can we have a loud salawat for Sayyid, please? Oh,